Americas versus EU, of course. Gabby going to be on that Pirate Warrior, and then they're going to be on Quest Mage. So already we are seeing some slight differences in some of the decks we saw mainly from yesterday. And guys, I think you'll all join me on this is the speed of play we want to see, right? Straight into a game, no messing about. Can't wait to dive in. Game number one here, Derek. And I will say, I do think the pressure must be on for the Americas right now because they did not have a good time in Constructed. Obviously, they just came off the back of a win in Battlegrounds. But I do think they really need to pull something out the bag here to start recovering some points.
Yeah, that's right. And I believe off stream, in the Mercenaries match, the Chinese players were also able to beat the Americas players there, which brought them up to a 4-2 advantage. And it's kind of like you say, they didn't have the best of times yesterday, but I don't think that was through poor play necessarily. Like, you know, the one blunder aside, I think that all three of them actually played some very, very solid Hearthstone, clearly understanding the matchups well. As Nayara here clearly understands this matchup very well by drawing double Incanter's Flow in her starting hand. This is peak Quest Mage gameplay.
Yeah, and I agree, actually. I think overall play was decent. I just think with the sort of losses across multiple modes stacking up, it's just a natural increase in pressure, right? You get to the point where the less matches you have left, the more you feel you need to grab those wins. Already, though, Gabby on the bottom has a decent curve of Pirates, but what do you make of this matchup in general? Do you think the Pirate Warrior can almost like act like the Face Hunter style here and just beat Mage to the finish line, or do you think, especially with this opening hand from Nay, that she's got what it takes to just slow this down enough to actually sort of finish the game out in that sort of 1-2 punch style that Mage does?
It's an interesting balance, yeah, because I would compare this more akin to Quest Shaman than I would necessarily Face Hunter, where they're both decks that have this inevitability that you're trying to work towards, but they have a reasonable enough game plan in the meantime. And when you're playing Quest Shaman, pretty much the only game plan is just to play stuff, hope it gets there, and then do some burn damage at the end to the Mage. But it usually doesn't get there. Their removal is too efficient. Pirate Warrior, on the other hand, I think just crosses the threshold where their minions are well statted enough, they come down quickly enough, you're getting some weapon chip damage in along the way, to the point where Mage actually needs a pretty good hand to be able to fight back against it. And I mean a good hand in terms of removal, because obviously Nayara's hand is good here in terms of the double flow, but it's slow. With that double Incanter's Flow, and so she is going to need, I think, a little bit extra to be able to fight off this aggression, because right now Gabby is both beating her down and moving very quickly towards Rakara, and once Rakara comes down, the weapons can very quickly close this one out.
Yeah, it really is relentless here, but it was a good pick up there and a good turn overall. Ice Barrier being down for Nay. There's still that first flame there to kill off the 2-2. Doesn't completely clear the board, of course, but I think just leaving this 2-5 up is completely fine here, and the Ice Barrier is going to help not only progress that quest, but also just negate some of this early game damage so far. But you are right, like, Gabby has got all of the sort of cheap playable pirates he could ever need, already sort of jumping through, what is it, stage 2 of the quest now? So not too far away.
Yeah, Rakara ready to rock and roll next turn with more pirates drawn as well. Obviously, the main card he's looking for is Mr. Smite, the biggest addition to Pirate Warrior, the card that really turned this whole deck around. If you can find that off the top, then we are really looking in business for Team EU.
There is some damage stacking up now. A little bit unfortunate with the way the minions lie that this fire sale doesn't really get much done. But do you think this is the turn for it anyway? Fire sale, there's also Hot Streak as well to help out with filling out a bit more of the turn to kill off some of these minions. Like, do you think that's worthwhile here?
So what have you got? I'm trying to see if you can manipulate it by killing off the captain first so as to lower the health on the other two, but it's not very clean, is it? Kind of wondering if you just go... yeah, playing the flow is probably too greedy. I was going to say you can go flow, hot streak, fireball, the captain, something like that. But this plan from Nayara instead to just mop up some of the damage is a lot more responsible, I'll say, and definitely where her head should be at in the gameplay, here, with just trying to clear up as much damage as possible so that the cannons from the Juggernaut can't close it out.
Speaking of the Juggernaut, it's going to come down next turn here. There's, like I said, Gabby, tons of pirates. This has been a really good draw so far. Not only just having enough pirates, but keeping that card draw going and having the pirates that, squeeze into the turns smoothly, right? Because you can have a good pirate hand, but they still don't quite add up to efficient turns where, in terms of mana cost. So it's been really, really strong here for Gabby. And Nay pretty much has the game plan just laid out in front of her, right? She's got to keep this board clear and accelerate the game plan fast enough to beat what she will know is a Rokara coming down 100% next turn.
And so in terms of going about that, just pointing everything at the face, I'm not seeing that getting there in time. Going for fireballs on minions is pretty much the only plan I think you have, but all the time she's going for this, she's just burning through more and more resources. That means if she ever does manage to get the Varden online, it's just not going to do enough to actually close out the game. This start has simply been too aggressive, I think, for Gabby.
Yeah, and the problem as well is she's just missing the utility that Mage has, right? There's been no real freeze so far, and none of the card draw really going her way either. It's just been burn damage, and against an aggro deck, burn damage doesn't work. You want the brain freeze, you want the... Oh, there you go. You want the flurries, you want the easier, or at least easier AoE, but of course that fire sale, because of how Gabby built up that board, just didn't really get enough done. Normally against aggro you want fire sale to clear the board, but like you said about the deck in general, the pirates are normally odd shapes and sort of just big enough to be not easy to remove. Second fire sale looks pretty good to me though.
Okay, yeah, that's a board clear for the moment. She can just go fire sale plus yeah, you probably do have to go for it. I was going to say you can go for Incanter's Flow trade, but I think you just have to go for it here and say, my next card will be Springwater or AI. You just have to.
Okay, the first outcome from the Juggernaut, not incredible. I've seen higher damage weapons myself, but still solid hand here from Gabby, being able to just throw down a couple more minions and basically say, well, you know what, this doesn't have to be that good, because my opponent has one card in hand and he's probably pretty confident it's not one that's going to give him too much trouble, because he's seen Nay kind of have to dig for inefficient AoE and sort of like just use every single piece of burn for removal. So Gabby's probably got a fairly reasonable read there. This is not going to be good enough here for Nay, and this might be a very, very quick 1-0 lead for Team EU.
It's looking that way, isn't it? Flame Strike can maybe bail her out for a turn if Gabby gets another one-attack weapon. But even that is not available here. You have to go for, I think, Cram Session and then hit the perfect chain of draws again. As I said, just going Springwater, Springwater, AI, and somehow piecing some kind of a miracle together. It's so unlikely, but Nayara knows she needs a miracle to have any chance here.
Okay, there's AI. It's not cheap.
It's
but bear in mind, she has double flowed, right? So
yes, yeah,
even though it's 3, she'll have 1 mana and then a -2 discount on every card she's got. So that's something. There's a flurry and a Runed Orb. Okay.
And now things... Oh no, okay, sorry.
Yep,
if it's a
fine.
one-attack weapon or one of these cannons hit the 1-2, then she can at least survive the turn. It's something once again.
And then just win next turn after Dawn Grasp. Easy.
Easiest game of her life. There's the one attack. Okay. It's not over.
The only slight problem is there's that weird double threat of these cargoes, like not only just being healthy minions that can threaten lethal obviously at any given time, but they're gaining armor every turn for Gabby, which means the odds on Nay being able to just pull something crazy out the bag just don't exist. A nice little play here from Gabby, just going for the oh, that's gonna be enough, isn't it?
That's so sick. He shivers his own timbers live on camera to win the game with the Cannoneer right at the end. Absolutely disgusting. And I mean, a well-played game from Gabby, but one that you just have to say, he just drew the Gabby hand. Like, he just got the absolute nuts, curving out perfectly into Rakara with value still to go afterwards. Nayara put up a very good fight, but there was just nothing that anyone could do there.
Yeah, it was a combination. It's one of those ones where the matchup can be difficult, of course. It's a pretty high speed aggro deck against Mage. That's normally what you want against Mage. But also just the fact that whilst Gabby's hand and just the way the game went out was very strong, Nay just didn't really have much to do. Like I said, for the majority of that game, she drew burn and not any kind of utility with card draw, easy quest progression. Brain freezes earlier on would have been so much stronger than the one that came a little bit too late. So it's just a really unfortunate draw combined with your opponent, one being Gabby and two playing like Gabby, which is just getting the nuts and winning games of Hearthstone. So it was a bit of unfortunate there start for Nay, unfortunate start for the Americas team. But just a quick reminder, because of our new high-speed version of the way we're going into this match. This is, of course, constructed. The teams will play 2 best-of-5s, where they will be able to change up their bans in the next matchup. So even though Game 1, didn't look too great, there's plenty of time to fight back, not only in this series, but in the next one as well. So not too much of a huge problem yet for the Americas team. But for now, that is just as good a start as you could possibly want for Gabby and Team EU.
Yep, you couldn't be more right. The Warrior, I think, is one of those decks that can very happily go for a 3-0 sweep as well. It has few bad matchups and few fantastic matchups. I think it's just a very 50-50 across the board kind of deck, as it has that extreme flexibility in the way it can play. It is obviously primarily a board-based tempo kind of aggro deck, as we saw there. Mid-range, I believe, is the mythical term I've heard players of old use. But it can also function pretty slowly and go for killing off a lot of aggro minions in the Face Hunter or Shadow Priest matchup. If it's running Rancor as well, it can function very happily as a slightly more controlling deck. And that generally lends itself to a very even matchup spread. And so in terms of the best counter available to the Americas region, if I take a look at what was banned away from them, obviously the classic suite of Rogue, Warlock, and Demon Hunter. And then I believe it was actually their Druid that took the ban. Which is very interesting to see after the good performance of Aggro Druid yesterday. Does, of course, mean that they have, now that the Mage is gone, I suppose, their Shaman available to come in. Yesterday, Nayara thought the Paladin was the counter for the Pirate Warrior against China, I believe. Didn't prove to be the case, but there are plenty of options available.
Yeah, and it's one of those difficulties, as you were just talking about how this Pirate Warrior kind of just performs across the board, is that Rakara, once that hits the board itself, the game plan can just change so dramatically based on what minions you get, what weapons you get. You mentioned, in your experience, you've had multiple versions of Bulwark of Azinov be popped out by an opponent. That is a very, defensive levels of outcome, which can then buy you time to draw more cards, build up the board. But then there's also the complete opposite end of that, where a Gohal just comes out of nowhere, and suddenly what Rakara, or more specifically the Juggernaut, is giving you is aggro options, and they aren't predictable, which is the biggest problem, right? Your opponent can't say, okay, they've played Rakara, so they're going to be really defensive, or they've played Rakara, so everything that happens is going to be super aggressive. It's just they play Rakara, I'm probably in trouble unless I'm not already very heavily winning the game.
And that's where things get a little bit scary. I will say that once again, the Shaman should be in the lead when it gets to that Rakara point, or at the very least turning things around and having much more value. Very often I find that when I'm playing this matchup, once the Rakara comes down, which it almost always does in this matchup unless the Pirate Warrior has a disastrous hand, you're just playing defense for the Shaman. You're just trying to stick as much stuff on the board, play as much health as you possibly can, because you're usually around 10 to 15 health, and you just want to distract the cannonballs so they can't go face, and then obviously use your overwhelming value to turn the tides and push things back against the Pirates. So I do think that Monsanto is in a good spot here. I like this matchup for the Shaman, but if we can see another hand like that from Gabby, like this one with plenty of aggression, then maybe it just can't even stand up to the heat.
Yeah, already Gabby's just opening hand there looks about as good as you can really want, right? 2-drop, 3-drop, 3-drop. There's coin there to be flexible, to maybe coin into 5 as well. So that's looking good overall. Monsanto's less so. If we're just going to talk about or act as if the Shaman is generally the sort of anti-aggro deck here in this matchup. Doesn't need to put on so much pressure, but being able to defend. Just get Perpetual Flame, which definitely is going to help, but I do think it is key that these pirates don't necessarily sit at 3 or less health. The numbers do go
Yeah.
above that, which makes these sort of guaranteed clears a lot harder to do in this matchup.
Oh, just look at this curve. It's getting better and better, right? With not having to use the coin, we can very possibly see Pirate, and then more Pirates, and then Whetstone Hatchet, Coin, Morshan Elite, is that the name of the 5-drop
Yes.
as well? In order to copy it and get multiple activations. Like, at 4 health as well, 2 4/4s is really difficult for Shaman to deal with without the landslide teched in, as we saw from the Chinese players. But crazily enough, Monsanto is just ripping the Perpetual Flame here. I was going to say that with the primordial studies that he picked up at the start of that turn, it looks like getting up to 4 health, the Perpetual Flame might be a bit more impactful, but he's being incredibly liberal with it here.
Yeah, just wants to start, I guess, stacking through the quest, and he does have Tidal Surge as well to sort of spot say, for example, there was 1 3-drop played this turn from Gabby. He could just Tidal Surge more than likely and just kill it off, right, and just keep going like that. It does pick up the Feral Spirit instead, which again, although not strictly competitive on board, will be able to get a good job done, at least just continuing to stall out the game, keeps sort of cracking on with that overload plan. So it looks good enough to me. I think Tidal Surge could serve Monsanto a lot better a little bit later on. So I imagine he will want to keep hold of that for now, just because it wasn't just a 1-for-1 minion sort of turn passing.
Yeah, I mean, Feral Spirit is definitely the best play on this turn, but the problem is I'm trying to set up for the play of the multicaster next turn, and he hasn't played Nature yet because Guidance is not Nature. He's played Fire. He can play Arcane, obviously, with the Primordial Studies. Like, he could go for Feral Spirits plus the Studies on this turn because it will unlock his crystals, which is pretty good. That draws him 2 cards, I think, at that point, because Feral Spirit, I believe, is also not Nature in terms of its tag. And you're usually very happy with a 2-card drawn multicast. I was just trying to think if there was any way he could get 3 spells drawn, but it was not an overly efficient way to go about it. So I think this is probably more appropriate.
Yeah, of course, that unlocking his mana crystals, because that was his 3rd overload.
Yes.
Right, so get that in. Still start to work on that multicaster there, but I do think that Gabby is just going to stay in charge here. He can even swing this next turn and play the elites as well, right? So he can actually just play a more even tempo plan, or he can actually just use Shiver next turn with a 3-drop and actually defend his board, right? If he goes into the weapon buff plus Shiver, like, that's just great tempo.
So much tempo, and then there's the finisher as well in the form of Mr. Smite. That's the one thing you really, really don't want to see as Shaman, because you have little to defend against him.
And because he's already seen a Perpetual Flame, like, 3-drop into just trade, and then go, remove the 2 wolves and just go face seems really strong.
It's so fast. You've already seen Perpetual Flame. It's a very, very specific hands that can answer that indeed. Okay.
Getting the value from the captain now. Interesting. I would have thought captain could have maybe come down a little bit later, but I guess the problem is if he's just planning on, like, maybe 2 of these minion live, get to push, then he gets to double up on the elites, then he goes smite. Maybe that's just the plan for Gabby, and he just deems that the coin and Shiver can be used to maybe remove a Canal Slugger without having to trade into it, for an example. Like, that could help out a lot, so he's just keeping the Shiver there to just be a little bit more flexible going forward, because the removal on those wolves were still 2 value trades.
That's true. And Shiver Their Timber scales fantastically into the late game in this matchup, because very often it will come down to, one Scrapyard Colossus between you and victory, and 1 mana deal 5 damage gets through an awful lot of that health if you're trying to push for a lethal. So I can understand why he's going for it here. Pretty coolly, though, he gets the double 6/4 Morshan Elite as one of the awesome side effects of the Whetstone Hatchet, getting a double buff effect. But now with the Bloom in hand, Monsanto has the kind of hand that can actually fight back here. He can go for Bloom Multicaster if he wants to draw 3 cards and try and find himself that Perpetual Flame in order to synergize with his Novice Zapper and clear the board. Even Lightning Bolt, Overdraft, all of these cards would be very, very powerful.
See what he gets. He can go Zapper, Bloom, and still go for the Serpent Shrine, right? To kill off one of the elites and build a bit of a board. Maybe that's the best he's got here.
Summons a 3/3 as well. It's a pretty powerful turn.
Yeah, I do think because Gabby's game plan has been fairly smooth so far, Monsanto should definitely just be on max defense, right? I don't think trying to do anything fancy or being greedy with things is worthwhile. I think this looks very, very strong.
Yeah, the problem is it overloads him for 5, I believe, rather than 4. And so he won't be able to play the charged call next turn, which is such a horrible breakpoint to be met at. It would summon 7-cost minions, which is not perfect, but there are a couple of good 7-cost minions in the form of the what is it? Northwind Champion, the buff one. I forget. It's been a long time.
Yes, Stormwind Champion, right?
Stormwind Champion, yeah.
Things are a little bit tricky because now even with this Rancor, it just doesn't really add up. I guess he could trade the 2/2, or even he could swing his weapon and Rancor, trade the 2/2 Rancor, and just shiver the 3/4. It's a little bit tricky, isn't it?
Right, like he could go attack his 2/2 Pirate into the Taunt, Rancor, and then play the attack buff Pirate to swing into the 3/4 as well, but even then, it's not fantastic, is it?
Is he calling out Smite? He's just going.
It's really missed the Smite time, no way! Fair enough, it's 6/5 with charge, that's pretty good.
Oh, this is nice actually, because he gets cannons now, right?
Yeah, very nice.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Those are some Gabby cannons.
I mean, that just looks like the correct line, honestly. Just to hit those with the cannons, go face for a million. Also, he's progressing that a little bit closer to Rakara. He has some level of burst damage with the +2 attack, but most importantly, if Smite doesn't die, like it's going to be pretty strong
it's just
for pushing damage.
Monsanto needed exactly Overdraft there, I think, to have a chance, and without that, he could go for Primordial Studies, but even if he hits a Guild Trader and can trade, he's then obviously 1 mana short of being able to go for actually playing the Overdraft that he would need to get as the very next card. So the specific chains of draws that I can come together don't even have enough mana for him to go for. So he can look what's in the box, but I think he knows as well as we do, there's nothing there.
Yeah, this was just Gabby just pressuring at every possible point, right? He saw the early Perpetual Flame, then started to go wide. Great, that works. I mean, he probably would have done that anyway, but still, you know, it worked out well, timing-wise. He just sort of created a board that required a good amount of removal. Monsanto did that whilst heavily overloading, which I still think was correct. And then Gabby was like, well, okay, you're super overloaded. I'll do a massive push to face. He got the cannons where he needed to go, pushed tons of damage and said, you've got 2 mana to make something happen on this board. Of course, it was a little bit unfortunate Monsanto got a dormant minion from his Serpent Shrine, so he's basically a whole minion down at that point, which maybe would have helped in some way or another. But generally speaking, Gabby just knew exactly when and where to put on pressure, and he finishes game number 2. They're currently 2-0 here, and there's a chance that the Americas could be looking down the barrel of another 3-0 here as Pirate Warrior gets to go again.
That's right. At the moment, it's looking like it's only the BG's team that are keeping the Americas region afloat, to be honest, with their consistent, very, very strong performances as the constructed team. I mean, again here, what do you want me to say? Like, it was a tough game for Monsanto. The one thing that we can definitely look at is that play of going for an early Perpetual Flame. That was very, very aggressive and not something that I expected to see. I can see the merit for it 100% because he wanted to get that quest completion as quick as possible. Generally, Perpetual Flame is kind of shaky against Warrior because they have a lot of 4 or 5 health minions that kind of break the chain a lot of the time. But it just drawn a Primordial Studies. It was a very quick play. And so if I was going to point the finger anywhere, it would be that. But the same merit, as you said, Gabby just got the Pirates once again, making Monsanto walk the plank. And now it's only going to be Nalgadan who has to 3-0 sweep on the backswing now for the Americas region if they want any chance at picking up the point in this first of 2 best-of-5s. And so looking at the Americas deck lists now, what have we possibly got that could get the job done? Mage and Shaman have both fallen by the wayside. The Druid was banned. And so the best he's got is Paladin, I want to say. Maybe the Quest Hunter, if you really believe in it. But against Pirate Warrior, I've got to say, that doesn't feel like the kind of matchup you want to see as Quest Hunter. You're just on the back foot right from turn 1.
And the biggest problem with that specifically is all of your early game sort of removal, even the burn that you can use as removal, just doesn't line up well, right? There's a lot of deal 2 damage, which, yes, there's some pirates there that are 2/2s, that's fine. But there's a lot of like deal 2 damage or deal 1 AoE, things like that. And you can see as soon as like turn 2, turn 3 start cooking for the Pirate Warrior, the minions are just bigger than that. So suddenly it's like, well, you need to piercing shot every single minion that the warrior has. Like, well, that's not going to happen, obviously. So this is going to be a big ask, and even bigger because this is LHS, which means Nalgadan not only has to, you know, win and carry, he has to do it with one single deck, right? He gets to pick one deck, and then he cannot lose with it for the rest of the series. And that is where it can be so much harder to reverse in this situation like this than it would be in, say, Conquest, where at this point you do still have 3 decks, right? So even though you might have to win one bad matchup, but then you might have 2 decent matchups, or, you know, 1 really good matchup, and so on to help you out. With this, like, Nalgadan has to make, or Team Americas, I guess, just has to make the choice of which one deck. And once again, we're going to see him fall onto the Paladin as his best hope at being able to sweep. So it's a lot of pressure here on Nalgadan to try and come back. A reminder, of course, we do have another series, another best-of-5 between these sets of players coming up straight after this, and then we will be having Mercenaries after that as well. And I'll tell you something, Darren. After we're just going to dip into Mercenaries for just a quick second. After hearing the Americas, what they were saying about playing against the Chinese team yesterday, unfortunately, due to some lengthy stream issues, we couldn't show it, but we have it recorded. They were saying they just got stomped by China. And all of the resubmissions today from especially Europe and Americas have just pretty much mirrored China's lineup.
Literally.
So, the problem with that is, I mean, we'll no doubt get to it later, is like, it's okay copying lineups, but you need to know how to execute them. So we'll see if that happens a little bit later on today. But let's dive into potentially the last game of this series between Team Americas and EU. Gabby, once again on that Pirate Warrior, of course. Nalgadan putting all of his hopes and the hopes of the Americas themselves on that Paladin.
Yeah, it's really the one deck I think that makes any sense here. The full-on aggro of the Shadow Priest would get countered by Control Priest or the Quest Shaman on the other side. If they'd gone with Control Warrior, they just get out-greeded by, again, Quest Shaman or Control Priest, to be honest, on the other side. I really doubt that was ever going to get there. Whereas Paladin, a solid mid-range deck. It's not a star performer in the metagame, but if you just need to win 3 games, it's certainly within the realms of possibility. Especially with a hand like this, for Nalgadan, Coin Angling Rod has been a pretty powerful play, admittedly, for them. I've been critical of it because they have omitted the parrot, the Sunwing Squawker, from their list. Yes, Sunwing Squawker, which has been very, very powerful for the Paladins that have included it, China specifically. But this combo of adding Murlocs to their hand and then buffing them with the Bannerman is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's not the first time we've seen this, and I'm sure it won't be the last. And so far, we can already see, right, that Nalgadan is at least competitive on board here. We can already see, too, that if this trade happens, that this pirate can already die regardless of what Nalgadan's next turn is.
Yeah.
So I think I'd like to see that from him very much, right? Just swing, trade the 1-1 in, and then suddenly, as you mentioned, all these Murlocs are going to get buffed if he plays Bannerman. So you can see this combo work out, and I'm with you. I'm a fan of the pirate, but you can't really argue with just the sheer power of this setup.
Oh, no dragons, unfortunately, in the list for that tamer to be pulling out. But even then, it's a very good hand, right? You've got another Bannerman, so you can start buffing up. As long as Nalgadan isn't succumbing to the pressure of this starting hand, which it looks like he's not going to. There's 2 Rancors in it for Gabby. I think Nalgadan is looking fantastic this game, right? He's got plenty of curve options, plenty of follow-up as well, with now Varian being picked up. It's very, very powerful. I'm greeting it. I'm going Bannerman again.
Well, tell him then. give him a quick call. Nalgadan, I've decided for us that we're greeting it. It's tough, right? Because this looks great for us, but we can just see double Rancor in hand, right? So Nalgadan does have to be at least a little bit conscious of more sort of on-curve pirates, getting that Rokara out quickly, but I also can't deny the raw power and the raw stat gain of just this Alliance Bannerman.
I mean, he's got Crab Rider as well. That's the ultimate comeback tool. Like, even though it loses Wind Fury the turn after you play it, that's still really strong the turn you play it, especially when buffed up to a 3-5, as I think it is now. That's going to kill almost anything that Gabby plays. A lot of cannons going to be fired here, though.
Boom, boom.
Gabby singing boom, 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 boom. I want you in a tomb.
I was just thinking of Nutra Boom Boom. Yeah, this is tough, right? Gabby really is going to have to just start getting something good off the top of the list here, because Nalgadan has so many resources, and now he has, like, it's going to be a little bit later because the majority of this hand is, of course, Murlocs, but so he's not going to be reducing these Librams down that quickly. But the fact he has Libram of Hope and, you know, second Libram of Hope already in hand, he knows he has that kind of sort of heal backup plan, so he can play pretty aggressively for board, even if that opens up Gabby to just play a bit more aggressive himself and try and just say, well, I might fall behind in the value here, so I'm just going to go face. Nalgadan knows if he can just get to turn 8, he can negate a lot of that potential there for Gabby to just steal the end of the game.
And as long as Gabby, like was saying, doesn't just get pirate into pirate, Nalgadan is going to be very happily able to bridge the gap to turn 8, where things start taking a big upswing, obviously, with his triple powerhouse 8 drop. The specific draws, admittedly, it's most of the deck for Gabby is just pirates, as there you go, that's 1 pirate off the top. Just needs 1 more to unlock Rokara now. But it's very specific, and if he doesn't hit it, he's going to fall very, very far behind. Rolling his eyes. Yeah, okay, you drew the absolute nuts 2 games in a row. I think you're owed a slightly more mediocre hand.
To be fair, Gabby's probably not used to it. So what is this?
Don't tell anyone.
Not drawing the nuts.
Don't tell anyone I drew badly once.
It's going to ruin my reputation.
His greatest shame. His dad just burst into his room. I didn't raise a bad drawer. Get off the computer.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, like, oh, Nalgadan's turn kind of looks a little bit weak, right? Just the Samuro and the 2-drop, but I've just already forgot the 2-drop was a 4-5, so maybe it's not quite as weak as it initially looked. Although swing into... Oh, he can't double Rancor, he's not got the mana. Oh.
Well, he wants to play the Cannoneer, right? Because that unlocks Rokara from his hand. I'm just wondering how you sequence this. Like, you can go Cannoneer, swing into McGurgle Prime, pray that you get, like, perfect cannons, and I guess then one of the cannons you wouldn't want to hit. So you could go like swing into the Tamer, the 4/5, and then hope that you get like one on the Tamer, one on the Samuro perhaps, and then Rancor at the end. I don't know. Like, there's a couple of tricksy things you can try and pull off, but maybe it's best to just hero power. Yeah.
Yeah, and we might. There's a chance you might even see a delayed Rokara, right? Because we might well have to see double Rancor from
That's
Gabby
true,
next
yeah.
turn. So maybe he's
That's
just
very
saying,
true.
I'm just going to get this, gain some armor, try and recover next turn, see what happens. And weirdly enough, even with all of Nalgadan's, sort of resource generation and the fact he's just been ahead in the hands like so far this game, he doesn't really have a great turn 7 play, right? He does have Liadrin, but that doesn't really look like it's going to do much other than be a minion. And maybe that's enough at this point in the game. I think if Nalgadan was going to play Liadrin and push face, it wouldn't be the worst play I've ever seen by any means. He has picked up now the Aldor though, so this changes everything, makes the plan a lot smoother here.
It does. And yeah, make no mistake, like, with or without that draw, Nalgadan was still mega winning this game of Hearthstone. He, like you said, the double Rancor that kind of feels like it has to come down on this turn isn't even that good anymore because it still leaves a 4/2, and then obviously the heal can come down either on the minion, which would be fantastic, on face, which would be fantastic, wherever you want to stick it. It's going to be winning this game, and Rokara, even if we were to see Gorehal miss to smite like 3 times in a row, I still think that's just too much pressure from Nalgadan with all these big taunts.
I'm going to see the respect here on the Aldor as well, and I think this is really good here from Nalgadan, right? His health total doesn't actually matter if he has tons of taunts in the way, right? Because this pirate deck is very straightforward in terms of how it deals damage. Other than the cannon hits, it really is just the minion base. And even with Smite, well, Smite does need to still hit through and either dodge taunts or have to clear them off first. So it's a big, big ask. Now there's the Mutinous Prime along with a Broom, which also looks pretty incredible. I mean, there's just options upon options here for Nalgadan. I think he still has Carriol in the deck, right? So he will gain Rush, even though he's got the 2 Brooms.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
Yeah, so he could have even gone Variant into just trade the Rokara and push face, but he is just going to go for another Libram of Hope. This is kind of a Variant and trade go face plan anyway. It just looks a little bit different, and he also gets that Libram of Hope number 2 in the Liadrin pool if it's even needed. So yeah, I think again, as you mentioned, as long as Nalgadan just plays cards in his hand and spends his mana, I think he is going to take this game.
Hey, the baton again. Gabby's been good at getting that one. Mr. Smite off the top, obviously not even close to getting this one done. Nalgadan's done his job, and he's broken Gabby's momentum, broken EU's momentum here, because this is just going to be game over with the second rush coming through very, very easily, able to close this one out. And now it's on Baby Bear and Bunny Hopper. They actually have to play a game of Hearthstone today, it looks like, in order to counter Nalgadan. They have to find the counter to this Paladin, which surely should be a trivial affair given the number of decks they still have available.
Yeah, that's the big deal. And it's what we saw a lot of yesterday, wasn't it? And what I expect to see in this format overall with this last hero standing. If any given team is on the back foot, it should feel easy to just counter pick, especially when you've got 5 other decks to choose from at this point, as Team EU has. So still going to be an uphill climb. And funnily enough, Nalgadan just taking a second just to see exactly what he wants to do here, because this just suddenly plopped out a ton of 4/4s. So it's maybe not super simple here, but it looks like it should be enough, right? He can make enough trades with this Broom. So Nalgadan just making sure things were clean and the planning was done. Gabby holding on for a bit of a hope that something would go wrong at that point. But Nalgadan taking the game there and just recovering a little bit at least for the Americas.
That was a cool lethal spot. Like, I know Gabby's one was cool with the Shiver Their Timbers at the start of the first game, but that one, spotting the hero power, giving it rush with reduction in the mana cost on the Libram because of the Aldor Truthseeker, that was a very, very clever play by Nalgadan. I was looking for a good few seconds, and he saw it before me anyway. which doesn't say much necessarily, but still, good job Nalgadan to have found it there. And therefore, as I was saying, EU, it's their turn to find the counter to this Paladin. In terms of the decks that were banned, once again, it was different in the fourth deck this time, with Gabby and Europe banning away the Druid from the Americas, and the Americas banning away the Mage. So they can't switch over to the Mage to counter the Paladin, which is, a decent matchup. The healing can offset it, so they're probably not too sad to lose the Mage. Maybe they're going to be going over to one of their aggro decks. They could just go for aggro Druid if they want to try and get underneath all of that big tauntage from the Paladin, just kill them before that happens. Face Hunter could apply the same logic, of course, or we could see a different route entirely, trying to outvalue them, possibly with the Quest Shaman of their own.
Yeah, I would. I'm just going to take a stab in the dark here and would assume that they would at least try aggro first, just to see, because it's kind of a weird sort of attitude to try and get behind, but because they still got 2 Qs effectively into Paladin, they can say, you know what, we could just chuck an aggro deck in, see if we can just blitz them, because Paladin can be awkward, right, to actually defend against a wide board early on. They have very few AoEs, and the AoEs they do have are normally coming more towards turn 4, 5, 6, as opposed to turns like 1, 2, 3. So I think if I was in that position, I'd send someone in with an aggro deck, maybe the Druid, to just say, let's just see if we can just grab the win and be done, because if not, we'll just go to the backup plan anyway. But again, you just ask yourself, like, where does this Shaman really lie in this Paladin matchup? Because you can definitely point out the pros, but also there's the negatives of if you take a little bit too long to do anything and Paladin's just chain dropping big minions. Well, Shaman isn't really equipped to deal with just consistent. It's almost kind of like the Demon Hunter aspect, right? Whereas if you just keep dropping beefy minions, they can't just single-handedly keep killing them off that easily. So I'm still undecided on where the Shaman lies against Paladin, because so much of it depends on that Paladin opening. We've seen Nalgadan kind of like weirdly consistently have the weapon into Bannerman like multiple games now that we've seen, and that is obviously very, very strong. But the second they don't do that, suddenly you're like, oh, there might have to be a pass turn or just like a 1-1 into buff and then pass and then so on. So it could be a lot slower, in which I think the Shaman would do really well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they queue here, but I would expect it would be something aggro.
Yeah, I could definitely see the aggro Druid just giving it a go first. Trying to remember when we saw this matchup earlier on. We've definitely seen it already so far in the week. It's kind of blended together a little bit yesterday.
It was the Druid?
Yes, yeah.
It was Samiao, right, versus Monsanto yesterday?
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
because Samiao had the Baron clear from like turn 2 and never used it, right? Because he just stayed ahead on board for so long.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that was the kind of hand where I think the Druid does start to struggle, because they didn't have, as I was talking about, these active effect cards, these cards that abuse Paladin's lack of removal. So if we can see a hand that instead either goes super wide at the start of the game or just slams down a Battle Guard and the Paladin can't answer, those are the games that Druid can very much come out on top of. But the Face Hunter has a lot of value as well, like the Doggy Biscuit. This is one of the biggest upticks in terms of matchup percentage. I think Doggy Biscuit is fantastic against Paladin. They really struggle to answer that. And here it is. As much as we can hypothesize about the other decks, it is going to be Baby Bear on the aggro Druid. It makes an awful lot of sense. And it's just... it feels like a pet class almost for Baby Bear. I really associate her with like Clown Druid that she was playing a lot back in the day, a few Masters tours ago, where it felt like most players had moved away from that deck as an archetype in total, where, again, unless I'm mistaken, I apologize if so, I think that she'd kept playing it and gone for these kind of counter Priest strategies when Priest was at the height of its dominance, which did remarkably well for her. And now on the aggro Druid as well, clearly a great affinity for the class, even if the playstyles of the deck are about as opposite as you can get.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right? You say, like, oh, you know, she's playing it back in the day. Like, that's not when everyone was playing it. Like, back in the day was obviously not too long ago, right? In terms of just the grand schemes of talking about Clown Druid and such. So, yeah, Baby Bear definitely likes to do her own thing when it comes to deck building and play. So we'll see how this one turns out. It's going to be, of course, the aggro Druid going up against that Paladin. Baby Bear takes a victory here. That's a very smooth match 1 win for Team EU, which will gain them 1 total point towards their tournament standing. But if Nalgadan can win, suddenly this might put EU on the back foot, and maybe, just maybe, the Paladin gets a sweep, because that would not be the first time it would happen, since we saw Simiao sweep on Paladin yesterday for Team China.
A perplexing puzzle here of a hand for Nalgadan. My first instinct is to say, keep Aldor Truthseeker and nothing else. Then I'm looking at that Barov and thinking that in the early game, if you even just play it on turn 3, that can be pretty powerful to clear off a Battle Guard, as I was talking about. This may be hidden behind a taunt, and you can just sack in your Barov on the following turn. So I'm going to say I would like to see 3 and 5 with Barov and the Truthseeker being kept. He's going 1 step further and keeping the Libram of Wisdom as well. I would argue that's maybe a little bit ambitious. I know it synergizes well with the Aldor Truthseeker, but coin Truthseeker on turn 4 is already a powerful play. I think I would rather find something a little bit more immediate in one of your 1 or 2 drops.
Yes, I think I agree, but I think if I'm trying to get into the mindset of Nalgadan, he's probably assuming that he can pass the first couple of turns, and by pass I mean, you know, hero power, worst case on turn 2, whatever. He can then just play Barov, and then that will deal with any sort of early aggression by itself, is the plan, I suppose. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen. And then he goes coin, Aldor, Libram, go, as the build off on that. So although it looks weird, and I do agree, it feels strange to just see a Libram kept with 0 minions in hand, apart from one that's going to drop down on turn 5, or turn 4, I guess, with the coin. It feels a little bit slower. And by 0, I mean he wants the Barov to die, obviously. I imagine that the turn it's played or the turn after. So it does feel strange, but I can definitely see the overall game plan here from Nalgadan.
Oh, Baby Bear has got a couple of tempting offers here, right? Because with the Sow the Soil in hand, now I'm very tempted in going nice and wide on this board. Which probably comes in the form of, yes, you play that to buff your minion, and then you go for Druid of the Reef for 1/1/3. I was kind of wondering, for a 1/3 taunt. I was kind of wondering if you play it for a 3/1 and then buff the Druid of the Reef, because then it doesn't just die to like a city tax, for example. You lose 1 attack immediately, but potentially gain a lot more afterwards. This is probably a little bit more sensible. It's like stronger against Samura or whatever it may be in a couple turns' time. And it does still push a lot of attack this turn.
Yeah, I was thinking to take that even further and just make the 3/3 and then play it as a 3/1 anyway, and just say you've not got city tax. Like, but this does 3 damage, 3 whole damage.
It's not ridiculous.
And now this is still a fairly, or at least to me, straightforward trade. I wouldn't mind either way here from Baby Bear, whether she wants to value trade with the 1/3, or even put the Marcel Cub in, and then just go Mule and 1/1, honestly. I think she can maybe be a little bit greedy with the buff, and actually just try and keep going wider, and maybe do a bit of a tester to see if there's any AoE coming out, and most importantly, if there's a Baron coming out from Nalgadan.
Barov.
Barov.
Yeah.
Baron. Oh.
Baron will have to wait until Mercy.
Yeah.
There's plenty of that.
The combination of having spent the last couple of weeks practicing to cast Battlegrounds, Standard, and Mercenaries has just boggled my brain. I honestly, I'm just calling out words and cards that are in the complete wrong game mode.
Well, don't feel bad. I don't know the card names in the one game mode that I cast well. So.
Yeah, I probably should mention that all of us just make up names for cards.
Yeah. All right, so I think Baby Bear should play Rindle Dindle the donkey here, and just
and then
buff
Steve the tree.
up. Yeah. Love that voice line. I am Steve. Get him.
If they ever allow us to do like voice packs for this game, that's definitely my voice pack would just be me making up names for every single card. And I'd make the cards just say their own names, but in my voice when they get played.
Like a really bad Pokemon.
Yeah. You play it. I'm Steve the Tree.
Steve. Nice to meet you.
Here though, so far, the Barov that Nalgadan has, like, can come down. He does have coin for city tax, so this is going to have to be the clear turn.
Oh
And
yeah,
that was
it's
a ton of
huge.
pressure, but this is where the game can start to flip, and I think which is why Nalgadan was okay with this sort of keep he went for, because he knew at any given moment it was very likely he could actually just completely clear up the board. And once that happens, it does ask a lot of the Druid to be able to just insta refill, right? Like, it's not as straightforward to say, oh, if I clear the board, they'll just have 6 more minions the turn after.
A rarely spotted spectator issue with the Phantom Arrow here. Haven't seen this one in a while. But for Baby Bear, you'd guess it just has to be... Or, actually, maybe it's not so simple. Both the 5-drop options trade horribly into a 3-2 and a 3-1, to the point where I kind of want to suggest, like, even Marsul Hero Power? Hero Power pass so that you can go Marsul plus Greybow and actually get the Death Rattle next turn? Like, these plays are not good.
Yeah, would it ever weirdly be... like... I wonder whether it would actually be, like, just Greybow in a weird way to try and just soak the 2 trades and then just hope you draw, you can build on the Arbor up next turn.
Maybe.
Oh, it's really tricky.
No matter how you slice it, this is very clearly not going the way that Baby Bear wanted it to. She went very all in, very correctly, I will add, on that turn 4. I think that it was much, much better of a play to force Nalgadan to have the answer. The problem was, he had exactly that answer. He kept 3 cards in the mulligan and hadn't played any of them. That kind of says that he's likely to have it. But again, even if you have that read, you still have to do it because you're going to lose this game over the long run.
I wonder if is this just going to be the trade? Okay. So there were 2 options there. There was option A, which I think this is just the most straightforward option. But I was actually looking at, like, Noble Mount on the Barov and then Weapon into the other one. And then just keep your 2 minions, one of which is still Barov. So if there's, say, like the kind of the weak refill board, Barov's 1 AoE is still a reasonable thing to come out.
No, that's actually a very good point.
This is still absolutely fine, though. Like I said, this is like the plan A. This is just a go-to kind of option. I did just wonder if he could retain just more trades on board and have more different attacks to be able to go through.
I think... So the weakness of this play is it's 1 minion rather than a whole bunch of minions, so your trades are a lot less flexible. But I would say because Nalgadan has Carriel and Weapon in hand, and even Noble Mount to an extent with the Carriel, his answers are still pretty flexible. He can kill a few minions here at once if Baby Bear were to try and go wide. And so because of that slightly stronger ability to answer these hands, I'm okay with Nalgadan's decision to just go with 1 minion instead. Because now, I mean, on this turn, you activate the Greybow, but who even cares? Double buff your Truth Seeker, smash it in. If they want to kill off the Marsul and summon it again, fantastic. You'll just kill it again. You can keep value trading it until the end of time.
I think now it can even go the other way, right? It can Carriel double Libram trade.
Even better, yep.
Go 4 for face. Oh, Nalgadan gonna go the other way, as you mentioned, just max buff the Truth Seeker. I guess, again, just at this point, he's in no rush. Like, the damage to face is just like an extra bonus, not really, oh, I need to push damage here. I think Nalgadan's key priority, of course, is to just keep this board from Baby Bear completely clean.
So obviously, for Baby Bear in this situation, I know I sound like a broken record saying it. Well, I was going to say, if you're falling behind, you should be looking at going for the play of Oracle, Battle Guard, plus a 5-cost taunt. I was wondering if maybe she would just go for the Bone Chewer Brawler, trade in the 1-1 to get the Greybow back, and like hope that it would just allow her to survive a couple of turns, and then she gets perfect draw, runner of Oracle into Battle Guard. Even that is probably not winning her the game, to be honest. But the way I see it, honestly, this just never wins you the game, because even if you hold on to these minions, like, I don't know, maybe you get composting off the top, and that allows you to go for a couple of extra draws. Like, I don't begrudge Baby Bear for going this for this play. It's almost certainly a loss no matter what. But even so, maybe there was like a 0.1% out with the other way. I don't know.
Yeah, there's just too much, isn't there? Libram of Hope in hand. There's the Banana Man to just keep drawing as well. This weapon's going to be clutch. I think Nalgadan should look at using this weapon. Yep, going to equip it and get a swing in. The Panther, although kind of a nice outcome sometimes, is not what Baby Bear really needs right now.
It's pretty good with the Grey Bear, right? It's a minion that can't be killed, which guarantees you a death rattle. But even then, it's very slow. Assuming that Nalgadan doesn't kill the 1/1 here, which I would be surprised if he does, then it has to, you have to trade in the 1/1. Then Nalgadan has to kill the Grey Bell. Then you have to sack in the Panther. Like, it's so slow, and you're taking 15 damage a turn as it currently stands. You can't afford to be that slow.
And now there's all trades with the Part Panther, and then the 3 damage goes into the Carriol. Yep. Ends the turn with Grey Bow facing down 2 1/1s in the weapon. It's one of the better draws she could have got, honestly. At least there's a plan, right? Like, it's something.
But like you say, it's one of the better draws for sure that you could hope to get in this situation, I suppose. Okay, looks like she's tanking the extra damage to not have to attack with this Panther. Because if she was going to attack with this Panther, obviously it should have gone into the bigger taunt. So I imagine here just wants to try and get repeat value on the Greybow Death Rattle, which is fine. It's as good a reason as any to not attack here, even if it means you have to leave Carriol on the board.
Yeah, kind of rough, right? I think as usual, or as is often the case when watching Druid, without card draw, the Druid does seem to struggle in these kind of matchups, right? If you imagine that if Baby Bear had a compost at any point, it would be looking much better, right? It should simply have way more options and maybe be able to build up a big board. But Nalgadan's done a good job of just keeping his cool and just saying, nope, like, I'm not going to do anything too crazy. I'm not going to go for more adventurous plays to like try and end the game sooner, because he simply doesn't need to, right? He just needs to keep this board empty, know that there's no sort of like funky Arbor up play that could maybe punish him and grab lethal out of nowhere. So so we did get word here that this is a disconnect, but the admins have favored or given the favor to Nalgadan for the win, because this is actually just lethal. If you look at it on board right now, the trade happens into the Grey Bow, then there's 4 from the Carriol, 3 from the minions, that's 7, 10 with the weapon, and then the 2 Librams of Wisdom in hand, which additional 2, which guess what, adds up to 12, which was Baby Bear's health. So that is going to be another win there for Nalgadan, and he's doing it, Derek. Like, he's keeping his cool. The pressure must be really high. You're in that situation where, as opposed to, and I'm sure this is a lot of pressure anyway, but when you're playing on your own, just at Masters Tour, Grandmasters, whatever tournament, you feel the pressure, right? You want to play well, you want to win. But when you're in a team and you know there are people relying on you to do well, to perform in this tournament, and a lot, not just these 2 in Constructed, but the rest of the team for Americas as well. They're all watching, wanting you to do well, and it falls on just you to reverse sweep a series for a point.
Oh yeah,
it's a big deal. But Nalgadan's been playing this game for a long time. He's been competing for a very long time now. So I'm really happy to see him just take those just cool, calm, collected approaches to the matchups, and it seems to be paying off so far.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, like I said, I had slight difference of opinion in terms of one card in the mulligan from him there, which again was very debatable. It was not necessarily wrong from him at all, and I would probably defer to him more so than myself. But apart from that, it was just very clean play. He knew exactly what to do at all points in the matchup. Paladin is not the most complicated of decks, but I think the way he's built his deck, he clearly understands it inside and out and is playing to the strengths of this angling rod build as opposed to the Sunwing Squawker build, which, if you want to make a tech decision, even though most players would probably disagree with it, it does, if you play to it well and are capitalizing on the effects it gives you, then who am I to judge? It's working fantastically for Nalgadan thus far. And that means that with both the Pirate Warrior and the Aggro Druid falling prey to the Paladin, clearly the aggressive strategies just aren't getting there. Nalgadan is hitting the curve, he's finding the Truth Seeker, getting these Librams and Varians online in order to shut down the aggro with these big taunts later on in the game. So is it time to change tack for Europe? Do they switch over to Bunny Hopper for their final game, as they have to, and switch over to the Shaman for their final deck? His pet deck at the moment, a deck that he has played countless games of already, even as recently as when the mini set came out, and I believe was very proficient with. Or do they just go in for it one last time with another aggro deck? They've still got Face Hunter if they wanted to just try and beat down this Paladin.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I think just judging from who's on Team EU and the fact that Bunny is the one playing next, I think it would be Shaman. I think arguments can be made for Hunter, can be made for maybe something else as well. But overall, I do think it just goes back to Shaman, and the tactics just sort of switch, right? And with the Shaman, you can always say, right, we can lock down any early game, we can, or just potentially just rush to Brakan and say, well, okay, you've got like nice Librams and stuff, but we're doubling up every single spell, right? That is so much. And there are a lot of outcomes from like the minion generation that, yeah, okay, if there's Libram of Justice or, you know, any kind of Barrow play, well, there's just more minions or death rattles and things like that. And the potential burn damage might just be enough to get through to Paladin. So I imagine we are going to see Bunny Hopper on that Shaman just for those reasons. But I'm really impressed. I just want to say, like, with Nalgadan just being able to even this up, because I thought this was just going to be a 3-0 move on to the next match kind of one. So I think Nalgadan's proof that he can keep up here, and he's going to be able to maybe just honestly steal away a point from EU.
Maybe. It looks like I think Nalgadan is having some issues reconnecting to the client to be able to play his next match. But again, with the delay that we have from the Chinese feed, I think a few minutes in the future, he will magically, I predict, be able to reconnect. So I think it should be able to fix itself fairly soon. Again, talking about some of those other decks that they could go for, I suppose, swiftly, in terms of their other strategies for the final counter queue here, going all the way to Game 5. We've talked about the aggro, we've talked about the outvalue, I suppose, of Quest Shaman, and then the aggro of Face Hunter. But there's one other way that they could try and go with it, and that's this Control Priest that Europe have built here. It is primarily a very anti-aggro build of the deck. It's got a whole bunch of low end. It's got double Desperate Prayer. It's got Desperate Play, even Shadowcloth Needle, just for a little bit of extra small AoE in that early game. And it tops out pretty low. It's only got one Elic mount. Does have Mutinous in there towards the top, but it's not a super greedy build of the deck, and it's obviously nothing that's going for kind of infinite value like the old Miracle Priests or Rally Priests that was very popular last meta. Rest in peace, best deck of all time. But it does still have a lot of generation value, and that is where you can really start to shine, because a lot of the cards that you can generate are very, very good in this matchup against the likes of Paladin. You have incredibly efficient removal answers to these big threats in Shadow Word Ruin, Shadow Word Death. Soul Mirror is fantastic a lot of the time against all these big Divine Shield minions. And you also have tremendous amounts of board clear in your deck. Zyrella, a Soul Mirror in there already. Hysteria is fantastic. Like, a lot of these pieces feel purpose-built for this matchup. The difficult part is actually closing out the game, finding these threats that are powerful enough to eventually win against Paladin. Because if you give them long enough and they just go Lady Liadrin and stack a bunch of the Librams, then things do get a little bit overwhelming. But I do just think it's worth bringing up. The Control Priest is not a ridiculous option whatsoever for Europe. It definitely can get there through the control aspect.
Yeah, definitely an option here, and it wouldn't be it's not like we've not seen Control Priest being played yet, but just giving you a quick update on why I'm sure chat is upset that we're not in the next game. It's all our fault, of course, but I just want to let you know that we are going to go to a very quick break, only 5 minutes maximum, I think, because we are making sure Nalgadan is good to go. We did see, a couple of issues you saw in the previous game with the client, and we don't want any of the players to have to play with disconnects or anything, so we're just going to give it 5 minutes, make sure he's good to go for the next game, as we know it is an important one. It's the last game of the first series here in Constructed, so don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the Hearthstone Global Invitational. We apologize about that slight delay. We just had to make sure Nalgodan was good to go with his connection, and it looks like he is. So thanks a lot for sticking with us. We are back and ready to go with the final game of the first series between Team Americas and Team EU. So we'll get to see what happens. What happens here? Okay. Whew. Don't make me look stupid, broadcast. We are going to see Paladin on the top, of course, as Nalgodan has had done a great run so far, having to reverse sweep with only Paladin. Has managed to make it this far into game number 5, but as we expected, Derek Bunnyhopper is going to be the call to make it to the Quest Shaman for this final game.
Oh yeah, no second thoughts here for Bunny. Straight on the Quest Shaman. He's made a fantastic guide on his YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, yeah, I don't know the exact name of his YouTube channel, but I'm sure you can find it if you go on his Twitter or just search Bunnyhopper YouTube, whatever it may be, where he really in-depth explains all the different matchups, all the different things you're looking for, which generally, he says, revolves around in the mulligan is the most important facet of your game plan. You have to just learn the mulligan and get a look at the data, or at least hear a pro's perspective on it. Everything else you can kind of figure out as you go. And this is really one of the cornerstones that he talks about, in that Lightning Bloom and basically any of the cheap overload spells, Serpent Shrine in particular, Feral Spirits as well, are premium in the early game. And so is this Wand Maker. This is a fantastic start to the game for Bunnyhopper. Exactly what you're looking for, where he's generating value, generating tempo, and also moving towards that quest very quickly, which you really want to do before turn 8, I'm going to say, before this big Librams start coming down, and then you can very likely keep up.
Yeah, this is a really strong start for Bunnyhopper, but I also feel like it's a pretty even start for both players here.
Yeah.
Because although Nalgodan has a very weak turn with just hero power now, Bunnyhopper can do big bloom things. He can go bloom into a Serpent Shrine with then something else afterwards if he really wants. But Nalgodan has good follow-up, right? Banana Man next turn, he has Carriol into the Aldor.
Yeah.
So it's all looking really strong in general. So this really does feel like it's going to be a big scrap for the board control early on, because you really do just put pressure on Paladin by shoving them off board and making them need to have either Barov or Samuro buffed to be able to actually come back. Because outside of those, it's very difficult for Paladin to play like their fairly clunky minions when they're already behind on board.
This is a strange hand, isn't it? Because part of me just wants to go coin into one of the 3-cost overload cards, which would be pretty powerful on this, and it is what Bunny is going to end up on. But then, of course, you can't curve into the second one unless you want to go with Bloom into it, which is reasonable. That would then overwrite one of your crystals, I suppose. But then you're not getting much value out of your overdraft in hand, right, in order to get rid of those overload mana crystals and deal some damage. But I think if a Bunnyhopper, he's quite happy to just go with coin Feral Spirits and then very possibly Bloom Serpent Shrine plus Wand Maker next turn for just a very aggressive start to the game.
Yeah, it looks like Nalgodan as well is just going for the straightforward play, just banking on that extra buff in hand. He could, of course, have gone that McGurgle into Broom, but yeah, it doesn't really look like it's more of a short-term fix to a long-term problem, I think. And I think that Broom we've seen time and time again coming clutch in these matchups. It's one thing that a few weeks back when we were seeing it in Masters Tour, in a bit in Grandmasters now and again as well, there were lists without Broom, and I couldn't understand why, because it feels like it's a card Paladin simply needs.
Agreed completely. This card complicates matters somewhat for Bunnyhopper because he raised his eyebrows somewhat at the draw of Instructor Fireheart, because I believe he was planning on just going, as I said, Bloom Portal, unlock the crystals, and then you have 2 mana for the Wand Maker at the end of that. But now you really want to save that Bloom for Fireheart, actually. If he was to go Wand Maker this turn, maybe even next turn he could go for Fireheart, right? If you can go Fireheart with a Bloom and play, I don't know, 2 spells, that's fantastic. That's a lot of value that you have gained yourself in the early game, and potentially a lot of tempo as well. And so whether or not his original plan is what I set out, I like that he's going for this line instead of saving the Bloom for what could be an even more impactful play with this Fireheart.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. Something I think I personally would have struggled to actually do in a game, I think I would have still just gone Serpent Shrine and gone, oh, let's go full tempo here while we have it. But you can see that the second that doesn't work, the second Now Gul'dan manages to clear that board, suddenly you're in trouble, right? You have Fireheart and one mana spare at that point, which doesn't really achieve anything, and then you're relying on top decks. So I do really like this from Bunny Hopper, and I think you broke it down great, where this just gives him not only more options, but the potential to just overpower Now Gul'dan in this mid game.
Does feel like it's kind of got to be the Broom on this turn for Now Gul'dan. It hurts because I think Broom is actually one of the best cards late game that I often talk about. If Shaman is able to get down Brucan, a couple of big charged cool minions, Broom plus a Libram of Hope is often all the answer you need to that and really swings the board back in your favor. But as good of all of that as all of that is, it's a long way away. And so I do think Now Gul'dan is most certainly in the right here just to use it now, not get too much value out of it, but just swing the board back in his favor, which is worth still an awful lot.
It's looking like Bunny Hopper might have to potentially switch away from a Fireheart plan, and I think that's fair because he's just simply facing down a pretty scary board. Did get a good minion as well. I can't remember the name for the life of me, but it is a 3/4 with its effect giving it Divine Shield, right?
Sunwell Initiate, my brain is telling me, and I'm correct.
Sounds correct. I wanted to say Sunwell something, but I didn't want to guess the second word. I was too afraid of ridicule.
Oh no, I mean I recognized the Chinese characters and translated it.
He's such a show off, isn't he, guys? Like Derek's like, well, actually, I translated it.
I wish. I don't even think they came up on screen, so even if I could, that would have just been. But either way, obviously the standard play this turn would be to just go for the Aldor Truthseeker, and I think with the second Libram, that actually becomes a perfect play because you literally get to go double buff on the Broom to deny the Frenzy as well. It's so clean.
It's kind of strange, right? Because Carriol kind of does the same thing as well. Could have used Carriol to trade in, reduce the Librams down anyway, and just retain the actual additional minion.
Alright, so we've still got Bloom, Lightning Bloom and Overdraft hit, so there's plenty of damage to be dished out on this turn, depending on how Bunny Hopper sees fit. I don't know if it's a Fireheart turn yet. That's the part of the play that you need to figure out first, because it very well could be, but he has a lot of other stuff going on this turn. The problem is, like, how do you fit in Fireheart next turn? Because I agree it's not fantastic here, but if you're overloading here or you're using Bloom here, all of a sudden it becomes a lot less effective. So I like here that Bunny Hopper is going for a different play of going for the very unlucky Devolving Missiles, hitting the 1-drop 3 times. Yes, it deletes the Librams, but not being able to smack into this 5/7, not even being able to kill it, is so unlucky.
Yes, that is very rough indeed. Wanted at least one hit either way, right? I think the third one, of course, you'd want the third one to hit the what would then be a 4-drop, but I think at least one of them hitting this Aldor is would have been a little bit of an assumption here for Bunny Hopper, but he's gonna have to make it work, right? He at least did get rid of those Librams, so he didn't have to worry about the buffs anymore, but yeah, it's not exactly where he wants it to be, and I do think as time's going on, the more and more likely it is that we are going to see this Fireheart very, very soon.
Bunny Hopper just sipping some calming tea here. It looks like it's calmed him down greatly. As that is just another fantastic top deck for Now Gul'dan. The Divine Shield on this Aldor Truthseeker is so perfect here because Shaman, they can discover ways to deal with a 5/7 very easily. You know, you get one torrent and it's just gone like that, or a spell damage and a couple of lightning bolts or overdraft, wherever it may be. Divine Shield is tough to answer for Shaman. You're looking at like Hex or some, I don't know, weird combo of Perpetual Flame to get there. But Now Gul'dan doesn't even like it. I'm quite surprised to see this.
Yeah, just valuing a 1/1 over giving a minion Divine Shield. I guess he's just under the assumption that there just isn't going to be anything specifically this turn that kills it, which again might be a... I mean, that's going to help. We talked yesterday about how Landslide was just good in, I believe, China's build of Shaman. They were in Landslide naturally, right?
Indeed. And another Landslide is tempting. I can't quite remember the exact health on the two minions on board, but with an Overdraft in hand, that Perpetual Flame is certainly interesting in its own right. But yeah, okay, at 5 and 4, not quite good enough. Oof. I guess... Am I crazy for wanting tiny toys? You can go for the Overdraft on this turn to unlock the crystals. But then again,
think you might be crazy for tiny toys.
Yeah.
Purely because Serpent Trine's just so good, and he has card draw, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, tiny toys isn't even that good most of the time. I never get anything than just vanilla tutus.
Hey, though, Libram of Hope being picked up from Nalgadan, which is good. It's one of the better draws he could have got.
Yeah.
But it is
so sick.
He's getting very close to just needing Liadrin, or, as we got used to yesterday, the very timely Varian.
True. Yeah, Varian on an 8 would be unlucky for Bunny Hopper, I will say. It just has to be the play, though. Here, you heal the minion, you trade, yeah. Or you go face, whatever, but you heal the minion. You get a huge taunt. Very, very aggressive play. So Zapper plus Overdraft is 5 damage if he wants to take out the 4/5. Alternatively, it could obviously be... It's probably better to go Zapper, trade away the Fireheart into the Divine Shield, and then Overdraft plus Portal to take out the 8/8.
That's what I was looking for, honestly, just to get rid of the big minion. Like the 4/5, you can deal with that in multiple ways as Shaman, but this 8/8 is definitely a bit more of a problem. Oh, unless...
Oh, okay.
So this does mean 3/3, and then he can just kill the 4/5, right, and then devolve.
I think he might just be sticking with his original plan, because if he goes for the devolve, he can't play the portal.
Oh, okay. So okay. So he just wants to do this. No problem. This kills off the 8/8, and he just holds the devolve. Yeah. This seems absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think this is probably better. Like devolve, giving them what, like a 5-drop and a 6-drop, or like a 4-drop and a 7-drop. Like those are pretty big still. Whereas this just clears off the 8/8 nice and clean and leaves him well ahead on board.
Does have Carol on that Hand of Adal for card draw. Interestingly enough, does he not want to Hand of Adal first? Because the Carriol doesn't need it to make any of these trades.
Makes it cheaper would be the point, but you know, you're not getting much value out of 3. Well, I was going to say you're not getting much value out of having 3 mana spare on this turn, but you could have played the Bannerman, and it would have been worse than playing the Noble Steed.
Okay, well, this is still good trades here. Now Nalgadan has to make this work. The Bannerman is going to help out with this issue that Nalgadan's fallen into, and what Paladin often falls into, right? Of just not having enough resources into this mid-late game. So it's going to help, but again, there are plenty of minions he could draw that don't have that have a pretty low impact. Whereas Bunny Hopper has a good chunk of card draws so far. I think it's looking good here. Is it 3? Is it 2?
I think it's 2. He hasn't played Arcane yet, which is kind of why I was expecting the Primordial Studies first, just to draw an extra card. But, you know, obviously when you're spending 4 mana on a multicaster, every single mana point that you can save is worth a lot. He finally hits a good target there in sniping off the 6-drop, the student, down to a measly Baron's Blacksmith. But it's still pretty threatening, to be fair, if he can't proc the Frenzy on this turn. So maybe he has to, right? You just preemptively trade in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would have been fine to make one trade and just risk it. There's like hero power, one minion trade. I guess there's just that chance it might spiral out of control. So because he can just leave a 4/4 and have to worry about that, it's probably worthwhile doing it this way.
I mean, it's the worst way to do it, as you can see from his expression. He left a 4/4 on board instead of a 3/2 because he could have traded into the 2/2.
The other one,
yeah, then bump into the blacksmith to leave a 3/2 on board. He knows it. You know, it was just a momentary lapse in judgment. But it's a big deal. Being able to value trade into the multicaster does mean he has a lot less pressure on this turn. This, however, is getting interesting because I can't remember if he's on 0 or 1 on the third stage of the quest, but depending on where he is, this could be quest completion, and now it's guaranteed no matter what, with the Feral Spirits picked up as well. He's at 1 out of 3 as well, okay. So he can go 3, 1, and then play Brucan on this turn, leading into the double charge call on the next turn as well. It's an incredibly powerful play. But look at Nalgadan's hand. We were talking about how he needs good draws. He's got Libram of Hope into McGurgle Prime. If there was any hand that could maybe apply enough pressure to get the win, it would be exactly this one for Nalgadan.
Yeah, it's so strong, isn't it? Because, for example, like you look at, okay, well, Bunny could potentially get to the point where he can get the rabbit, right? And rush and clear some of these big boards. But the problem is these Murlocs have Divine Shield, and he's still going to get through this taunt as well first. So it's not straightforward here. It's definitely looking rough for Bunny Hopper, but we know as well as anyone that doubling up on these spells, that even just these 2 spells he has in hand, can give him a million options for next turn.
100%. Just think if he gets, what would you need? Landslide here? That's 4 AoE. That literally deletes the board almost entirely in its own right. If he just gets one of those off a guidance. Lightning Storm, Perpetual Flame, like there's so many powerful board clears he could get there. And that's even ignoring the Charged Call, as we were saying, the other very, very powerful card in this hand.
Spell damage as well could help, but that's definitely not going to be a priority to play first.
Oh, it's close, isn't it? That's good. Being able to get the lightning thingy, I can never remember the name of that card, but deal 4 damage to a minion and its neighbor twice means that it will guaranteed kill off the 8/8 if nothing else on this turn.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because you also don't, you can't really ignore Revolve here either, especially if you can value trade with the Brucan. Because this, a lot of these are the 2-drops, right? So it just gets rid of Divine Shields. Oh, he brought the 8-drop down to the 5/5.
That's so sick.
The Leorix there, not looking cool.
Oh, he takes
Double
Bunny
rabbit.
on the first, clearly hoping for taunt on the second, but instead he gets double Bunny. That is most certainly not what you're looking for. Pretty sure you're taking the 10/10 here instead and just accepting that you don't get a taunt. It sucks, but it's at least stopping some damage.
They call him Bunny Hopper for a reason. Oh, and he gets the spell damage, of course, so Raz gets to clear up this board as well. Even though it's just a 2/2, it's about as clean as it's going to get. Nalgadan is a god at drawing as Paladin. It is ridiculous. He's just had, Libram of Hope, McGurgle Prime, Liadrin as his back-to-back draws, right? That in the late game, it is the absolute insane levels. And look at the Bunny Hopper understands. He's like, I cannot believe this. These are literally the best back-to-back draws you could possibly get in this scenario. It does not mean Nalgadan's out of the woods yet, because this is still pretty scary for him, especially because we can see Bunny Hopper's still got some juice in the tank. But still, it's about as good as it was ever going to get.
All right, what's in the box? Let's draw off of this overload. Oh, double bolt for 10 damage.
How much is that?
How much is that now?
Because it's
10,
also
20.
It's also
That's
3
lethal.
from Raz.
Right? The
Hang
bolt
on.
does 10,
16,
20, 26, 29.
I think so.
It's just game.
Oh! With
That is
doubling
so
spells,
filthy.
all things are possible, Derek.
Oh, I love this deck, man. One
Oh
mana
my, oh my.
Pyroblast to end the game. Absolute filth and incredibly well played by Bunny Hopper. He did his team proud, getting the win, even against a very, very good draw from his opponent. Very lucky draws from Nalgadan. And to be fair, it's got to be said, an incredibly well-played series by Nalgadan. He almost single-handedly carried the team on his shoulders to victory, but wasn't quite able to get the win in the final game, as Bunny Hopper just gets the job done. What a win there for EU to be able to get the first win in the best of 5 and get a point on the board versus Americas, who have been dominating in the battlegrounds, but really struggling everywhere else.
Yeah, this again, I just want to echo your thoughts. Like, Nalgadan nearly had an amazing run in this series, right? Nearly brought it all the way back to 3-0 with Paladin. It would have been incredibly impressive. The fact he got so close was great, but again, the problem with this Shaman deck and why it can be so dangerous to play against is if you're playing that late game, and Burkhan, you would imagine at that point, obviously has been played. Any single draw can escalate, right? It's not like, oh, well, if it's one draw, they do one powerful thing. Most often, one draw doing one powerful thing leads to more powerful things because everything's doubling up, the generation's doubling, all that burn, for example, as we just saw then, it is very, very dangerous and can just spiral out of control out of nowhere. So really good win there for Bunny Hopper. Good effort by Nalgadan and Team Americas. And as you said, that means that Team EU has gained 1 point so far in Constructed today, and they still have one more best of 5 to play versus Team Americas. I believe they are getting on with the bans now, as they do get to re-ban and change if they really want to. And I feel like so far from what we've seen in this tournament, Derek, that there's a maximum like 1 flex ban potentially that we're seeing jump between like Mage, Shaman. Now we've seen Druid banned, but the core of Demon Hunter, Warlock, and Rogue, obviously, I can't believe I missed the most obvious one. Demon Hunter, Warlock, and Rogue feel like just 3 bans that are going to happen every single day, every single series. Do you think there's any merit to changing any of these bans up? Do you like the Druid ban that we've seen so far from EU?
I think it's reasonable enough, right? I'm just trying to think if, because Americas have the Quest Hunter as opposed to the Face Hunter, and EU have the Face Hunter. Maybe EU could consider banning the Shaman? I don't know, because they have a more aggressive lineup. But at the same time, EU don't have the Shadow Priest. So I think because both players have less overall aggro decks than some of the other regions who have Shadow Priest, Face Hunter, and Aggro Druid, then they could consider banning the Shaman. But for here, I do agree with what both teams have done. Banning the Druid is probably, I think, a little bit better than banning Mage. I just don't think that Mage is that powerful. And also for EU, they just have the Face Hunter, which can be used as a counter to Mage at any point to be able to hopefully get the win. And so I think for both players, they're different bans, but they work well within the context of their line.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty, right? Like, wanting to ban Mage when you're running, 3-4 aggro decks feels strange, right? If you go saying, oh, let's ban Mage, even though we just can queue Face Hunter into it. And also, I think that is further built on by the fact that I'm pretty sure that they will never queue Face Hunter first anyway. So it's not like, oh, we really want to queue it first. If it loses to something else, it's like, well, why would you queue it first? Because it is such a strong Mage counter. You just have that in the back pocket if needed. So I do imagine the bans will stay the same. Again, we might see some switch ups in terms of what the opening deck is, which we know is extremely important. But I do just want to shout out as well, yesterday in the 2 matches that the Americas played versus China, Monsanto opened twice with Aggro Druid, and obviously this can't happen because Aggro Druid's been banned already in the first match. But my more meaning is Americas have already shown that they're willing to just do the same opening again, whereas I think the other regions that played changed their opening in Series 2. So we'll see if this is something, some part of strategy, some part of the plan, or Monsanto really just wanted to queue the Aggro Druid again as quick as possible.
We'll see. I mean, I think in